Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this week's Zoom talk on Dawn Clements. The topic is Dawn and exhibiting her work with Joan Susan of Pierogi Gallery. First, I'd like to thank my gallery staff, incredible team, Liz Knowlton, Hasey Cross, Dylan Everett, and Dina Wright. Without their efforts, we wouldn't be having these talks. For those who have missed the last talks on Dawn Clements, Carter Foster spoke on Dawn Clements, Edward Hopper, and other artistic influences. Last week was Angela Dufresne, Judy Glansman, and Sandy Skolnick on Dawn's Artistic Circle. And you can view these on jamesbarronart.com. Next week will be the final talk, April 21st, Thursday at noon, a Zoom talk with Michelle Alpern on Dawn and cinema. The show is on view by appointment only through Saturday, January 23rd, but most people are seeing it online. So please go to the site, jamesbarronart.com. You can also email Liz at jamesbarronart.com if you want to see even more photos. So I'd like to welcome Joan Susan, who are the founders of Pierogi Gallery, which was established in 1994 in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's really the opposite of a mega gallery. It's an artist gallery. It's run by artists. Artists love it. Artists flock to it. The famous flat files are a gesture you would not see in most galleries. It's almost unique to Pierogi, which is that they look at artists' work, they put them in the flat files, and they can be seen by artists and by collectors in sort of a pure state. Drawings being really the essence of an artist's overall work. So Joan and Susan, welcome to our talk. And my first question is, how did you meet Dawn? What was it like when you first met her?
Well, thanks for inviting us for this Zoom. And I first met Dawn early on when the gallery was moving on, like in 96, I believe, 1996. Where Susan and I met her when she came to the gallery because of the flat files that you mentioned. She came in to show some work to put into the flat files, which was great, but she brought in work that would be appropriate for the flat files, which are fairly small. And then little did I know that she worked at the scale she did. And
we had a size limit of about 22 by 30 inches for the flat files.
And the work she showed me were fantastic. They were all the works, some of the works, I guess, from the Venice Biennale that she had in 93 and other newer works. And she went on to describe her larger works, which I was fascinated by. And she invited me to come to her studio, which was in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And I think Angela Dufresne recounts this as well, but when I went to her studio, she wanted to show me this very large drawing, and I said, great, so I was walking up to her apartment, and I realized that how large can this drawing be? This is her apartment. So we walked up the steps, and of course, she grabs this very large roll of paper, and we ended up walking back outside to it was like a playground area where
it was a basketball court.
Yeah, basketball. It was a very large area outside, and she started unrolling this 78-foot long drawing that's called Middlebury, and I was totally fascinated that she could just almost cavalierly lay this out, outside for me, and it was just
leaves kind of blowing over it.
And she was so enthusiastic, and I just fell in love with her at that point in time, and her work. It was fantastic, and they continued from there and showing more and more work.
I remember when she called me, because she and I were great friends really since college, and she said, "Oh, I'm so excited. Joe's coming to my studio, Pierogi Gallery. I love this gallery." And I remember the whole scenario, and she was trying to sort of figure out what she was going to show you, and I know that it meant a lot to her, but what was your impression of Dawn as a person when you first met?
Well, she was very open, very concerned, and also very interested in what I was doing, what the gallery was doing, as well as explaining her work. So I realized that she was a very open person and a very caring person, and it's always interesting when you're running a gallery. At that time, it really wasn't a gallery per se. It was a kind of a glorified studio visit in Williamsburg, but she was interested in what we were doing and how we would might present the work. And so I was very enamored by her because of her interest in what we were doing as well as explaining her work.
Well, I'm going to dive right into our PowerPoint presentation because we have a lot to go over. Tell us about this first show, solo show from 2017.
Right. Well, were shows after this, but this was her last show at the gallery per se with the all of the work, and it was curated around the idea of the table and what
And
she
still
did.
life and tabletops.
Yeah, and things and at that time, unfortunately, are the pills and her construct with uh, her life situation. But the drawings all were placed in a way that we could, this larger drawing now is 3 tables in Rome and other still lifes that she had in the space. So we wanted to construct this show around the idea of the table and what's presented on the table and how she would draw the work and present the work.
I think in the next slide, it also shows, so basically for her, the show was called Pills and Tables and Things. And it was all of these tabletop still life studies and different ways that she had approached it. And the one on the right there is a drawing that she did at Civitella Rainieri in Italy on residency. So actually most of the works I believe in this show were all done at different residencies.
That's right.
The one in the previous slide on the left was done at MacDowell, and that one she said she was really trying to approach how work on how to approach a still life. So previously she had always approached it by creating depth of field by putting an object in front of another object, but in the MacDowell piece she tried to see if she could create the sense of perspective and depth of field by not having the objects touch each other. So she had specific ideas that she was working on in each of these different still life pieces.
One of the interesting things about exhibiting Dawn's work is that logistically, most of them are too large to put in frames. So I'd like to point out that we use push pins in order to keep a large work, which is 253 inches wide, this Rome, tabletops in Rome. And then here in this slide, you could see that Joe and Susan, you did put that one in a frame.
Yeah, we tried to frame some work. She was interested in framing work just as a practicality of work on paper. But she, as you know, would draw way beyond the size of a frame's capability. And she, as a lot of artists do, love the access to the surface of that paper, to see the paper, to actually not be able to touch it, but actually be able to see it and the texture of it, and without that separation with the plexiglass or the glass, and the way she would hang it with the pins and such were kind of a intro to her studio, how she hung it in her studio, and didn't want to depart from that. So it was a way for her to do that, but it also allowed her to develop this incredible scale that she would continually add paper to and develop, and they became very sculptural in that sense. As you can see in the drawing on the left, the 3 tables in Rome, that it's not a rectangle. You know, she just kept on growing the piece and developing her compositions.
One of the other things that we kind of realized, or Joe, I think, realized with Dawn later on was painting the background wall that the work is hung on a slightly different color. So we've used like a pale gray here. In the earliest shows, we didn't do that, but then we realized that really sets off the pale colored paper off the wall. And then we also started, Joe started placing spacers between the works and the walls. So they're actually slightly, maybe 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch off the wall. So you really get that sculptural quality of
The shadowing,
piece.
yeah.
The shadows, because not only are they not square or rectilinear, but they're also not flat, which makes, handling them a bit another issue because they're not flat, and storing them, etc. But one of the other things that we wanted to show in a lot of these slides was how Dawn's work was never static, and so the presentation of her work was never static. And so there are a lot of, in these slides, there are a lot of images of works that were shown in multiple different locations. And in each location, it's different. The space is different. There's different, length of walls. And so like Travels with Myra Hudson and ours and your show with 3 Tables in Rome, and also Kitchen and Bathroom are shown in multiple different locations, and how that kind of changes the work. And sometimes has to be wrapped around the corner if there's not enough space on the wall, and creates this even more of a 3-dimensional space.
It's an interesting contradiction because she was so respectful of collectors and she appreciated so much when they would buy her work. And she'd be almost amazed that somebody could step up to the plate and do it, because she's using fugitive medium like watercolor, ballpoint pen. Some of them are almost too large to frame so that you've got an issue with sun. A work like this large one from Rome was delivered on a roll. You have to unroll it with glycine and then you pin it up. It took maybe 4 or 5 people to pin it up. Just to move through this, the show was so mind-blowing, this one that you had at the gallery, that one of the many collaborations we did was I asked if we could travel the show to my gallery in Kent when we were at the Kent Barns. So this is a show, a view of the manifestation of the same show, minus 2 pieces that had already been sent off to collectors. So we had a central atrium there. To the west were some high transom windows, which we had to cover with paper because too much light came in and I was worried about the watercolor. But it was thrilling to exhibit it. Dawn was very sick at this time and she couldn't be there for the installation, but she came the week before and I took a tape measure and I taped off and I showed her where every single piece was going to go. And there was only one question about a very small piece of wood. This is a free-floating panel where we have things on the front and the back. I was looking for a sight line. The black sumi ink was actually incorporated into the large piece, so we had a great sight line there. I'm going to go through this quickly. The piece Fune off in the left actually did, one version of it, I believe, found a home. A collector bought a work which is going to be donated either to the Wadsworth or to the Whitney. I love how she would have mandates for this one. It was objects not touching. I'm going to quickly go through the few of the times that I exhibited her work at my gallery. This stunningly beautiful watercolor was in a show called August Flowers, and we had it on the wall there. This is a piece that she started in Rome for something we called a conversation. She came to Rome for about 2.5 months. She occupied a studio, which we housed her in, and she worked every single day, working very hard on these pieces, and was obsessed with the, in the video we're going to see, there's this is a piece which she actually gave, it's the second version, she gave it to my daughter Isabel as a gift. And it started this piece, and here's the video. I'm going to play just a short bit of it.
I drew this dark gray ink, and the piece was only this big. And then I thought, well, that's sort of a nice thing. Maybe I'll draw the whole thing. So I added on some paper, and so I just kept adding on. Then when I got to the end of this, I thought, oh, why don't I draw the hyacinth? And so I added on here, and the hyacinth, of course, got very big. And I mean, for all of you who live in Rome, you know that this is not really this big in real life. It's, it's a little Christmas branch of berries. So I just keep adding on as I go. And I'm working on a little table and working on a tabletop. And so when I do, I have to fold up the drawing in order to work on it. Because I don't work on the wall, I work flat on a table and sometimes working on my lap, and I have to make it this big even when it's that big.
Oh, but it's also a way of not being intimidated by the overall piece, is that right?
That's true, to be honest. I sometimes, sometimes when I start out a piece and I think that it's going, and I know that it's going to be very big from the get-go, sometimes I find that a little intimidating, and so sometimes I just it seems to work every time. I must be very stupid, but it just seems like I'm always able to trick myself into thinking I'm starting out making a small piece, but eventually it gets. But those.
So I thought that was really interesting because she says it must be very stupid. For those,
it's so great to see her again.
Yeah.
I mean, she was the most phenomenally brilliant human being who had an ability to make everyone else in the room feel like they were brilliant. Is that something you had as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
she absorbed a lot of attention, and she gave a lot of great energy to people, and she was so charming that it was so hard to deny it. It was just you wanted to see her. It was all in her work too. You would just feel how she could present that sort of energy, and she gave her, it was her work is so subjective, so she kind of lived in her work, and you kind of could see her life in her work.
And what she says in that video is, I've heard her say that so many times. Like, I started with this section and I thought, oh, that's something interesting. Maybe I should do that too. I feel like I've heard her say that so many times about almost every different piece. So
a lot of the papers she would add, she would leave blank, because the absence of the mark created a presence for her, and you could almost fill in the drawing that you saw. She would let you sort of participate in the drawing. So, and also the scale of many of these drawings we're going to show allowed you to be a participant in her work. You weren't a voyeur or an observer. You were a participant in her work. And she, that in that way you could feel her spirit and her energy in the work. It was very unique.
If you don't mind, I'm going to show a brief clip. This is a video taken by my assistant in Rome named Sarah Brill, who's a very brilliant woman and videographer. And when Dawn was doing the work for the conversation, which was to make work for 2.5 months, and then we'd have a conversation at our apartment with about 75 people invited, Sarah spontaneously took this video. So let's look at that and we'll discuss her technique from it.
Okay.
So what she's doing is she's looking with her eyes,
mm-hmm.
and she's not really looking as much down at the paper. And it's sometimes like a type of automatic mark. And then she'll glance down to see where she is, and she compares where she is with this flower that she's doing. In any case, that's a short clip. If anybody wants to see a longer version, we've got it on jamesbarnard.com. Take us through this. This is a 2019 group exhibition drawn together again at the Flag Art Foundation in New York.
Right.
Yeah, this is an example of how Dawn would present her work in a show and be happy with presenting the work in with the context of the architecture. So her work would sort of become part of the architecture as well, because it wouldn't fit on a flat wall. They wouldn't have a wall large enough. So her work is incorporated into the corner, and she was happy how this would work, and this would show how the work would be different in every space it was presented in.
This piece is called Callie and Schuyler's. I think it was at the Taft School. And this show was a very large group exhibition at the Flag Art Foundation in New York City, all on drawing. And we don't have them in here, but the other installation views from the show show a 50-foot long wall of all salon style hung works by all other artists. But Dawn's work had this whole corner in the space, which was really powerful.
It just passed the entry, so it was the first work to be seen. I'll point out also one of the many beautiful things is that we've collaborated on so many things together. My current show, of course, is through Pierogi Gallery, but you exhibited this piece in Miami at an auxiliary site, and as I recall, one of my clients acquired it and then lent it for this exhibition.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was a client who really didn't have a clear idea exactly where the piece was going to go. And sometimes collectors are just passionate.
Yeah.
Something and think, I have no idea how I'm going to exhibit this. And with Dawn, that happened.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing about
those are the best.
these works, is a lot of her works end up in institutional areas or institutions that can afford the space, and private collections have a hard time, collectors have a hard time placing the work, even though they love the work. But so that's always been an issue with Dawn's work, but the larger works are usually much more capable of being in public space.
So here we have an example of Dawn collaborating with another artist. Would you like to talk about this with Martin Wilner?
Well, this Martin Wilner, Dawn does collaborate with a number of artists through her career, and one of the artists she collaborated with is Martin Wilner. She's done sketchbooks, kind of based on the exquisite corpse idea.
The moleskin, accordion fold moleskin sketchbooks that
Beautiful.
Martin does in his own work.
Beautiful work. And this show Martin put together was working with other artists, and this where he collaborated, working with each artist, working every day through the month in a conversation where the artist would, just say what they did that day, or the day before, every day what they've done, what book they read, what movie they saw, where they visited, who they talked to. So he developed a whole calendar, diary of that month, and the drawing next to it was a drawing that Dawn did in hospice in her bed, and I think it was probably one of the last drawings that she accomplished. And so we exhibited that piece as well. And
The next slide is a detail. Oh yeah, close up.
it's hard to see the piece, but it's a clock on the top, a drawing of the clock from her bed, and below the clock is a vase of flowers that have been that are slowly, falling apart as she's been drawing it over the days. And it's sort of a, interesting piece to have as her last work.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that Dawn was a tenacious and almost impossible to tire worker. She could work maybe 18 hours straight with very brief pauses.
Yeah.
And one of the most remarkable things for all of us, all her dear friends, and I should say, Angela Dufresne and Judy Glansman and Mary Temple and Nicole, and those of us who came to visit her, even right up until the end, she didn't stop working until 9 days.
Yeah, she loved the work.
And we're talking about being very heavily medicated. She lived for her work, and she lived to give. We discussed that last week with her relationship in the art world with friends. She was a devoted friend. She was devoted to her work. And I think she was really thrilled that she could continue making art, even when there was no hope that she was going to live, that the art would live.
Right.
So here we are in 2015, Mother's Day. I remember this show.
So she developed these drawings. She's, Dawn is by a lot of people. A lot of people know her work primarily as black and white work because of the film works that she's done and other drawings as well. But in this show, she did a lot of color work, and which she has done through her whole career. But people really got to know her work, I think, through the film studies and the larger black and white Sumi ink works. And this show that we presented was all in color, and all these floral pieces called Mother's Day. And before this work, I think she decided to do this color work for the first time after a long period of just doing the black and white.
She mentioned that she realized that, I think she said, the way she put it was, she realized after the fact that she had been doing a lot of black and white work after her father passed away. And this was the first sort of reemergence of all color, almost all color in these pieces. But like the piece on the left, Chrysanthemum, and obviously all of Dawn's work is about time and reveals the passage of time, but especially with these flower pieces, because they're disintegrating, the flowers are deteriorating over the course of the time that she's painting them. But I love that one on the left is called Chrysanthemum. That's a beautiful, the negative space in that piece is so beautiful. The blank space is so crucial in that piece.
I think, James, you mentioned before too that when Dawn was working on these still lifes, the flowers would be decaying as she was drawing them. So over a period of time, she, would start as a fresh flower on one side and the other side would be decaying. And so these are all, and also she would be drawing and writing on many of her drawings. So these drawings became a performative sort of event, a documentation, almost a diary of that period of time.
Of temporality, and she'd been very, very upset after her father died. She was close with him. He worked for Raytheon doing drawings of, engineering drawings or technical drawings and whatnot, but he did exactly 10 drawings every single night before he went to sleep in their basement. And Dawn, as a young girl, would sit on the stairs watching him. And he would go through and do these, and he left them in piles. And I saw them in '78, I saw them. But I said to Dawn in that conversation in Rome, I said, your work is about temporality. And she said, oh, you can say that. That is really for sure. One quick thing I want to say, it's just an aside, but after this period, after her father's death, when she was working in black and white, she and I spoke every day. And I said to her, Dawn, I had this weird dream. And she said, what was it? I said, it was about your work. And I said, it was in color. And she said, what were the colors like? I said, there were muted greens and muted reds and muted orange. And they were amazing. And she said, oh my God, I haven't told anybody, but for 3 months, I've been doing color works. So it was, she was very giving in the studio. She would send photographs of works in progress. Here we are, the Saatchi collection, Saatchi Gallery in London. This is a big deal for her.
Yeah, she was totally, even Saatchi, though, as you can see, couldn't show one of her works on one wall.
So they acquired, for the permanent collection, 3 of her works, Travels with Myra Hudson, another piece called Movie, and Color Kitchen. This is Travels with Myra Hudson.
It's an amazing
This
drawing.
is a detail of the central stair section.
This is all in Sumi ink as well.
Do you recall how long it took for her to do this? I mean, it's 552 inches wide, 46 feet wide.
I know.
She had a time limit because of the exhibition, but probably at least 3 months or.
Yeah, I think the Whitney piece that we'll show later took her 3 to maybe 6 months, but that was all ballpoint pen. So she was very quick with Sumi ink. She could really just move along. And this piece is called Movie, study in her studio. I think she titled it Movie because there's so many edited sort of shots of her studio. Like it's the linear horizontal lines are all her studio floor, and then there's shots that are perspectival and some are
if you go
flattened.
If you go to the previous slide, you can sort of see like the previous one. You can see in the center that those vertical lines, that's the column in her studio.
Right.
And those are chairs in her studio, and that's the wooden floor.
And the couch and the patterns and the fabric. And then she would, as you'll see in other drawings, is that she redraws her drawings that are in the background in another drawing. So she would constantly be reliving and working in her studio.
I like these images just because they show the physicality of, it's so hard to portray Dawn's works in flat images. And we worked on a lot of presentations with her and maybe, applications for grants and shows and things. And one of the things we always talked about was how hard it was to get the impression of her work. You would see a flower or something, but unless you saw it installed and in the correct scale, you just did not get the correct impression of
Dawn
the work.
would love working in still life. She would love working. She would never draw out, sketch out things. She would just start painting, and it was phenomenal how she could just capture everything that was in front of her with her own style. It's quite remarkable.
About very large drawings, 46 feet wide. Could you share some exciting news about a show that's going to be upcoming?
Well, the large scale drawings are always impressive. She works very small as well, but the large scale drawings are so impressive. And we have now had the opportunity, after talking with Kelly McComsey, who was at at Manna in New Jersey, and he was very interested in presenting her work at Manna, and which will probably be in April sometime through June. And at this time, because Mana has such a beautiful sort of possibility of showing the work with the space, we'll be showing a lot of large scale works, the boiler drawing, hopefully, and drawings. This is in the Saatchi collection, this drawing here, but other drawings that are similar scale and size, and they'll all be able to be seen at one time. It's so exciting to think about seeing all of this work. And another component of the drawing or the show is that a lot of Dawn's drawings are based on films that she would sort of live vicariously through in a way by painting these scenes. And we're going to be showing some of these films at the same time during this period of time, so people can come and enjoy the film and see the drawings and see her, interaction with those within that context.
Now, before we move on, and I'm going to have to go through the slides a little bit quicker now, I do want to have a very big thank you not only to both of you for all your efforts with Dawn, but also with Mana, and to Selig Sachs, who was very instrumental in helping to make an introduction. For those of you who don't know him, he's a really brilliant collector, brilliant human being. And while the art world gets such a bad rap for everybody buying for investment or buying for ulterior reasons, he's a good-hearted human being, and he came and he's very excited about this. Now I'm going to start to make tracks through this a bit because we're going to run out of time for our slides. This is obviously the catalog. This is a piece.
This is what it's Richard Klein put together at the Aldrich Museum ballpoint pen show. Just wanted to show you this slide because of the possibility of framing her work. She actually wanted to see how it would look framed in the proportion of the paper.
And by the way, since Richard and the Aldrich are neighbors, Richard, for those of you who don't know him, is a brilliant curator. The Aldrich is a must-see visit. It's a great museum, worth the detour, as they say. So, wow, here's a pretty hefty size drawing. 70.
This is the first piece, the piece that I was talking about at the very beginning, called Middlebury. This where she did Middlebury College and at the residency there. And this drawing is 78 feet long, and was shown at the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle. It was gifted to them through a private collection.
Through the Bill and Ruth Drew collection. So they originally acquired the piece and then donated it to the the Henry.
And they had that possibility of showing it. And as you can see, they it covered the entire gallery space, and must have been an impressive sight. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to go see this show, but it's an amazing presentation.
I believe this is the largest work that Dawn did. It's 78 feet wide.
There was another work that Bill had actually acquired for me very early on. I had a small studio on West 74th Street. Dawn came, I wanted to introduce her to Bill, and we kept kind of rolling it almost like a Chinese scroll, and finally I said, he said, God, I'm having such trouble seeing it. She's, oh good, let's go outside. And she unrolled it on the sidewalk, same experience that you had. And she wasn't afraid of that. She wasn't afraid that the little street dirt might get in the way.
Dawn would always, when she did her drawings, she would step on them, fold them, work with them. But when she considered the drawing done, she didn't want any new folds or any marks placed in them. So it's always a challenge to try and find a way to keep them in that condition, rolling them and putting them in a safe space.
So this is the show that Carter Foster, who generously gave his time and his ideas in a previous talk 2 weeks ago on Edward Hopper and the effect of Hopper in contemporary art.
Yeah, we wanted to include this because of that reason, that you did talk about how Hopper's work and Dawn's work had a definite line of connection.
Loved Hopper. Do you want to talk about this briefly?
We talked about Martin Wilner earlier about his collaboration with Dawn, and Dawn collaborated with this other artist, Susan Rethorst, who is a dancer and
choreographer.
Yeah. And so she wanted to work with her, and this is at dance space project at
St. Mark's
St.
Church
Mark's
in
Church, yeah.
East Village.
And so this is another way of installing her work. They hung it with clips as almost a curtain in a very theatrical way. And then performance ensued with this piece, but we wanted to show that work and how it was presented.
We should point out also that Dawn did a lot of scenic design work. She got some of the work from Bruce Stiglitz, who was another close friend of hers. And she was able to have a cup or two of coffee and just go the entire night. She would absolutely make art until she was done. It was a phenomenal sort of endurance test, like a marathon runner.
Yeah, here's another detail of that, yeah.
Wow, that's a great photo.
This is another Rethorst studio drawing, but we wanted to show this. You can't really see the piece, but we wanted to show this to show you how Dawn really had to be physically part of the work when she was working on it. When she was installing it, no one was allowed to be standing on the drawing except Dawn. So
they did have glassine over it, but this is the second Susan Rethorst drawing that Dawn did, and this was in color. The other one was in black and white, and this one they mounted to canvas at the top so that it could be hung suspended like a tapestry or like a
this was much
curtain.
later than that other first drawing, but it was at the Bell Gallery in Brown University.
Wow.
Yes, this was the Bell Gallery, Brown University, as part of their 250th anniversary alumni exhibition.
Yeah. So this is another collaboration that she did with Mark Luthold. He is a ceramicist, and she was fascinated by the work, and they collaborated by working. She would do a drawing, he would do a ceramic of the drawing, and then she would do a drawing of that ceramic, and they would go back and forth. But a lot of the sculptures that he presented to her, she would paint, not paint, but draw. And this show consisted of many of those sculptures and tabletop presentations. And the large one on the left, which we have other shots of, she did that drawing is all done on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that have been taped together. So she would do a drawing a day on this, or more a day, and tape them as she would go and number them. There's a slide coming up, I believe, that shows her presenting the back of the piece as well.
That piece is called Table of Work, and that was an instance where she decided that she wanted to display the table that the works were drawn from and the sculptures along with the drawing itself. That's Dawn holding up
that's the back of the drawing. So you can see that every drawing was titled and numbered, and that she could tape them together as she went along. She always had unique ways of handling the paper. Many people worry so much about the pristine nature of paper that they're working on, but to Dawn, it was just another element of her drawing, almost a sculptural element.
I love that she dates, signs and dates each piece. It's like a journal almost.
Yeah, and they're very detailed. It's always the date, and I like how it's normally she does it in the same medium as the piece. So like this is the signature, and the details are painted with the dry brush sumi ink that the drawing is.
A good example of Dawn's attire. She puts the clothes together in a very unique way, and kind of impression when she walked in a room, she didn't look like everybody else.
Yeah, that's in her studio.
I love these shots of Dawn because it's great to see her again. That video that you played was so wonderful to see her again.
Yeah, there's some wonderful tapes on YouTube for those of you who had not heard Dawn speak. Various presentations she gave, and you get an idea of the scope of her knowledge and her ability to present. And she was also a very shy human being. She had to get over that to be able to speak in public and to teach. And teaching was something that she just absolutely adored. I'm going to go through this. So
this is another piece. It was this is at Mass Mocha, a show that a group show that she was in, and this is again about a film-based piece where she was the Titanic that she presented the work, and it's a very large piece.
Well, here's the Whitney Biennial, which is one of the great thrills of her life to be included Many thanks to Carter Foster again for being so prescient. You want to talk about the Whitney a bit?
Well, this is an amazing drawing. It's all ballpoint pen and paper. When she was Francesco Benami was the one that curated her into the show, and when they decided to do this, she didn't have a piece really available that she wanted to show, so she started the drawing. This is the beginning of the drawing, as Dawn does. She has a very small section of the drawing to start, and it ended up being 20 some feet long, 25 feet long. But when we presented it to the Whitney, they didn't see the full drawing. They only saw half of the drawing.
They only saw about that part. I think that's about all she had completed when, maybe a little bit more, when they selected that work for the exhibition.
These are stills from My Reputation. It's a film, a black and white film. So this is Mrs. Jessica Drummond's.
That's Dawn at the opening with her mom and brother.
We wanted to include these as well because this is a teaching group, I think, from the Whitney, or an educational group.
Yeah.
But how Dawn would show her work in the studio, she would just lay things out on the floor, because that was the only practical way to really view the work in that kind of spontaneous way. And it was, as you can see, they're very enamored by the work, and it was a very kind of a interesting way to interact with the work. With
And
Dawn
this is
there.
that was the same piece that was on the wall previously and was shown at the Whitney.
This is the boiler piece, which is fantastic, but we had a space in Brooklyn called the Boiler, and we would exhibit a lot of different works, and Dawn wanted to present a work that was from the Boiler, in the Boiler. And so she would come into the space when it was very cold. I think it was the middle of winter.
It was so cold in there because there were a couple of radiant heaters up near the ceiling, but that was like 25 feet
And
out.
she would sit on the concrete floor on pillows and things, and she would draw the boiler. And again, this is the drawing of the boiler, and of course the walls are 16 feet tall and with a higher ceiling, and of course Dawn drew the drawing 18 feet tall. She could never contain herself. So but this shows you the left side of the drawing is basically all of the piping and all the linear sort of aspects of the drawing, and it turns the corner, and then you can see the other side, the darker side of all the doorways and things that go into the boiler, and then she captured that more in that texture of it. So
she spent about, I don't know, at least 3 weeks going to the boiler every day and just working in there.
So that's like 18 feet by 45, 44 feet wide. And hopefully when we show this piece again at MANA, we can show it on one complete wall. We might have to do it in the corner again, but
Kelly at MANA was looking at the various spaces that they have available to show Dawn's work, which is, they have so many amazing spaces, large spaces, but there is one space that's next to their boiler room, and is their brewery space, which is, I think, what where the work may be shown, and so that's why we're thinking of including this piece there.
Yeah, it's only been shown once, of course, in the boiler, and it'd be great to see it again.
She was very appreciative of the opportunity to work in the boiler. And she would say to me, like, I'm not trying to make it so difficult for dealers. I'm not trying.
Yeah, well, that piece alone is difficult. You need a crew to hang that piece because it's on paper, and you have to be very, interested about how it's going to work.
So much that you facilitated this wild ride. And we understood that very few dealers would even go along with it. But you think about Cool Nellis and artists who were just really true to their vision and not so concerned about the commerciality of their work.
Well, a lot of dealers work with painters and artists that work on paper, but this piece is a very performative piece. It's like working with a performance artist in a way.
Right.
That was another piece that was in the same show that was called Ruin. And so that wall in that space was obviously an exposed brick wall. So it just shows how her work can appear on, different surfaces. And the next slide, I think. So
that's her in the studio with the drawing starting in the background. But as you can see, she's drawing this piece that she found. It's an old chandelier that she loved, the sort of the,
So she
the
found that
decay
on the
of that.
street and brought it into her studio and decided she wanted to make a drawing of it. But I don't know if everyone can see because the squares of us are on top of part of the drawing, but you can see that the drawing, the Travels with Myra Hudson drawing, was installed in her studio on the wall behind there. And so that became part of the drawing, part of the
Background of the
gray
drawing.
was the Travels with Myra Hudson. And that happened a lot of times in Dawn's work, this sort of layering of things behind what she was drawing in her studio.
Here she is to give some scale to that. Dawn was maybe 5'3" or something.
That's just a shot of the education group again from the Whitney, and the actual boiler that that's behind them, to get a sense of what the drawing was like. This is another gallery shot, early show that we did with her, but these are the pieces that ended up at Saatchi. The one on the right is two of those, yeah. One on the right is the large movie drawing, and the one on the left is her colored kitchen, which are both in the catalog. And
so that's the same large piece that was installed at the Saatchi Gallery, and that's Dawn.
Of course, looking very nice.
This was the Cosmologies show at James Cohan Gallery. There was a group show called Cosmologies, and they decided to include Dawn's oval piece.
To give you a sense of installation with other artists.
Yeah, and Dawn appreciated Jim Cohen for that inclusion and spoke about what an elegant, brilliant man he was, or is.
It was a early Snug Harbor show that we worked with Snug Harbor, and Dawn was very happy to see all of her work. But again, it's all black and white, interesting works that are all film sort of associated.
This is another installation view of Travels with Myra Hudson. This was at Feigen Contemporary in Chelsea and New York City, but just shows another way of presenting that.
Yeah, how the work would change by the space that it's in. And so it had a different character every time it was shown. This is that oval piece that was in James Cohan Gallery, just to give you an idea, but this is based more on a sort of TV sort of imagery.
So this was when we first met Dawn, she was working more on these drawings of characters, especially female characters from melodrama and soap opera and things. And this one started again with the small drawing in the center.
Very, very dense drawing.
But this one actually was mounted, the drawing itself, the paper was mounted archivally to canvas to give it more support. But you can see this one is always a little bit tricky to install and pack because it's almost become scalloped, because gluing the different sections of paper together, it's no longer flat.
And it was so sort of worn from folding so many times that we had to mount it to some other surface. She liked that idea, but it kind of decreased the folding of the paper, which it's a bit of a compromise for her, but she loved how it looked when it was finished.
This is the kitchen and bathroom piece. And
this is actually her apartment as well.
Yeah. And this is the one where, I mean, you were talking about, James talking about collectors supporting Dawn's work. And this is where we first met Marty Hale. He just came into the gallery and saw this work and loved it and didn't have a place for it, but loved it so much and thought maybe he would have a place for it in the future, and acquired this piece. And then eventually a few years later, he realized that he wasn't going to have a place for it.
Then he was interested in who he could, where it could be placed. And we talked to Marty about it, and we thought that the Whitney would be the best opportunity if we could actually get it there. And so we ended up talking to Carter Foster, who facilitated this acquisition to the Whitney. And Dawn was extremely happy that it ended up there, and hopefully one day soon that the Whitney will decide to exhibit it again. I know it's difficult, but if they're listening, I'd be happy to build a wall for them or whatever it would take to show that piece.
Dawn would often slip into kind of like this, she was from Chelmsford, Massachusetts, where they have a very heavy Boston accent. And she would sometimes slip into it. She'd say, the Whitney, the Artists Museum. They love artists there, she'd say it in this Bostonian way.
This is the same drawing, but a different installation. But
Just a different thing.
this is the Venice Biennale, of course. She was her big shot in 1993 and showing there. And Francisco Benami, who did curate her into the Whitney 17 years later, curated her into this exhibition.
And she was in the Aperto section of the emerging artists. And this was just the catalog page of some of those works that were included in that, in the Venice Biennale. So those were, yeah, Dawn.
And there's Dawn.
This photo was taken at Civitel Ranieri, where she just absolutely loved it outside of Perugia. Jeanette, Isabel, and I visited her there, and it was like Dawn at her full glory. She was working well. She was walking a lot. She loved the other people there, from the scholars to the musicians, and she was a grateful human being. And I'm going to quickly go through this, our current show. That's Jeanette sitting in front of a piece which the cross really is about her father's death. A piece from Pont-Aven on the right. This is the upper gallery. So we decided to do works prior to her illness in the upper gallery, keep it very spare. We put these paper white narcissi in front of this work, which again has to do with temporality. This is our lower gallery, which is where I'm sitting right now. Everybody can look at that. This is after she already had the prognosis, which was a very dire prognosis, which she stayed very up throughout. She never really felt sorry for herself. And once she said she had a boo-hoo moment, but she said, oh my God, excuse me, one boo-hoo moment, yeah. So the table has ephemera, which are parking tickets and laundry tickets, with the actual works that she did on paper. This is part of a triptych where she did it in orange and black, then in watercolor, and in black sumi ink. A double mirror, which we discuss at length in another one of the Zooms. Here she's using the ephemera, Pont-Aven. One point I'd like to stress is Dawn and I met at Brown. We met at we both transferred. She came from Simmons College and I'd been at Lewis and Clark College and had traveled to Greece in the Newberry Library program. But this is the main green, and Dawn's archive, all her papers, this is the archive at Brown. It's kind of a thrilling thing, which Angela Dufresne really helped organize, the assembly of all these boxes of, and then all of her friends got together to help collate them and go through everything. Lastly, this is a picture of Dawn at Pembroke campus. Ironically, the archives are just to the right and about 50 feet away in a room. So I went to the window and I said, I took a picture of Dawn carrying artwork in a canvas bag with a straight edge, with everything. This picture's from 1979, possibly early 1980. So the archives are a great opportunity for any scholar out there to go up and go through this documentation. There's so many possible subjects, but starting with the fact that she really was sort of an accidental feminist, which is what Angela Dufresne was talking about in last week's talk. This is the beginning. I'd like to thank both of you, not only for today's Zoom, but the endless hours, days, months, and years you put in to establishing Dawn's work. She appreciated every single minute of it. It's a great example, I think, for those of you out there, that it's possible for an artist to find an ideal correspondence with two people who love art, who are artists, who run a gallery. I'm avoiding that word gallerist because it's too modern for this, what this correspondence was. Dawn appreciated every minute of it. I appreciate every correspondence, every collaboration we've had. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close?
I just really appreciate your efforts in this. And if anybody would like to find out more about Dawn, there's a lot of great reviews. John Yao did a great review of this show that you're seeing in Hyperallergic, and to research her work online and come to the gallery and experience some work if it's possible, if we have the space. So it would be great to encourage more people to get involved in her work and her life.
One of the
It's always such a pleasure to work with Dawn. I mean, it was always a pleasure.
One of the beauties of doing these Zooms and also the exhibition is that we feel her presence here. I think going through this and having some video clips and seeing the photos. So in essence, thank you both for all your efforts and for joining us today. For those of you who were viewing it, we appreciate you participating. And do go to pierogi.com. They have a tremendous archive of Dawn's articles and everything you could possibly want. Get up to Brown. There are several books in the making, and they've got a great team that will take you through the archives. Thank you once again.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.